I want to talk about Sunday's video and some of the accusations that I got for it. If you don't know, if you haven't seen it, Sunday's video was a 2-hour-long conversation with Britt Hartley from No Nonsense Spirituality about the future of American religion, or the lack thereof, because as we all know, the belief in God is indeed declining here in the States. And it was the response to this video, this conversation, that was so interesting to me. On one hand, the people that liked this, they loved it. I always get kind comments. You guys are insanely nice to me. But more than most videos, this is your best video. This is your most important video. Thank you so much. And I appreciate that. The people that disliked it hated it. And what is interesting here is that maybe for the first time, it was atheist viewers who were telling me how much I got it wrong, how much they disagreed. Now, of course, there's people in the middle, and I didn't put you over here either. There are people that said, hey, I really liked it, interesting conversation, but I disagree with her or with you here or here. Totally fine. And of course, like the title suggested, we had some outliers who really, again, interesting that they were atheists, I assume, based off their comments, who kind of sunk down to the level of what we typically only see from the very worst of those Christian commenters. My favorite being the one that I used in the title, which is that I'm not a true atheist. They also said that this video was a plug for Christianity. If I'm not a true atheist, who is? And if this channel is actually a plug for Christianity, can someone tell that to all the Christians? Because they think of it very differently. So what's the point of this video? Is this me being defensive because I got a lot of comments that disagreed with me and I want to be right? I have checked myself for that. I don't think so. I think I believe in that conversation. I think I believe in the goal that I've had this entire time, which is to help people who are doubting deconstructing or who have deconverted. And I know atheists don't agree. Of course we don't. In fact, it's kind of one of the points that leaving religion looks different for everybody. But are there some things we should be thinking about for the society at large when we are making this huge shift for really the first time in history from a belief in a deity to a lack of that belief? And so my goal for today's video is clarifying my core argument. And again, not out of defensiveness, but because I really believe that this is an incredibly important conversation no matter what side of the fence you land on. And I actually believe that a lot of the people who disagreed either, of course, didn't listen to the whole thing or they misunderstood what we were saying, which I'm not putting on them. I'm putting that on Britt and myself. We could have better articulated things. So that's what I'm going to try to do here. And if you still disagree, wonderful. Let me know in the comments. But let's sharpen up what the message was before we end up on different sides. Even though it was a really silly and pedantic comment, I did want to start by addressing this idea, kind of paradoxically to how we typically see it, of the no true atheist. Just as much as I hate the no true Christian, this fallacy doesn't serve anybody on either side in any way. The dangers of holding this ideological purity test are very real. Acting like there's no nuance on critiquing religion versus accepting or rejecting religion. Acting like to agree with believers in any sense immediately disqualifies you. Finding good in something that is definitely harmful means it's what? No longer harmful. All of these things that go along with this kind of idea that if one doesn't become some militant anti-theist, they are not really an atheist is just small thinking. If someone says they don't believe in God, I'm betting they don't believe in God. Because if they believed in God, just saying they don't believe in God for many of the religions is about the worst thing you can do. But that was one out of many comments that disagreed. And here's where I think a lot of the disagreement came from. And it was not understanding or me not articulating well enough the difference between criticizing where secular society has gone in lieu of religion against promoting that religion and its benefit. There is a whole world here that needs to be uncovered a bit better. If Britt and I say something like Christianity has important tools or religion has important tools for individuals, we are not saying it is the only thing that has tools. We are not saying that it's true, and we are not saying that it's good. I can't be clear enough on that point, and we should have just outright said that. I think the most beneficial thing we can do is just zoom out. I always like to zoom out. Religion exists. Do we agree? If we can agree that religion exists, that it had a beginning, probably somewhere near our beginning, it evolved right alongside with us. We can see this when we study history. And even if we know that it's false, and even if we know that it's harmful, do we think that it just still evolved along with us with no benefit? Do you think we hung on to it just to keep harming ourselves, just to keep holding on to a lie? I don't. I think it was, and for many people still is, useful. That doesn't mean it's true, it doesn't mean it's good, but it is useful. And for some people, it actually does provide well-being. Now, it might be hypocritical, and it might be at the expense of someone else, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't provide for the good for some people for some times. That's something true. That's something important to understand. It's also something to wrestle with. And there's also a huge difference we need to look at between how it affects the group and how it affects the individual. Now, a lot of what Britt was saying, and this is one of our points of contention, was she kept talking about how it affects the individual. Now, individuals create this society at large, and we should understand that, but there are ways that something can be good for the individual and not for the larger group. But still, as we're helping people move through the loss of religion one by one, can we talk about some of these tools that religion provides? Let me give you an example of where I think things went awry in the understanding of the conversation. Britt and I would talk about point one, which was that people lose objective morality. And so many people got hung up right there and they said, no, there is no objective morality. That was something they believed that was false. They can't lose it, Brandon, because they never had it. Yeah, they never had it, but they thought they did. And we're talking about how it affects these people. If you grow up, you're indoctrinated, your whole life is oriented around the idea that there is a grounded morality from a moral lawgiver, and then you lose your belief in that God. And so you have to come to terms for the first time in your life with the fact that morality is subjective, or that it's at least not grounded in something more objective. That's huge. Now, the way I see it, these two different approaches play themselves out drastically different towards that person going through this new struggle. We can argue with them about the semantics of how, no, you don't understand, you never had an objective morality to begin with. And let's stop there. How did that go for them? Did that help them at all? Did that provide any insight into how they should move forward? No. Or we can say, hey, you had this thing that you were living your life based around the idea of objective morality, and now you don't. That is a loss. I understand semantically it's not a real loss because it never existed, but to them, it's a loss. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about people that are facing a new world. That's a very tricky thing. And the other thing is, and I'm going to just say this right now, there's a spectrum, right, of people that leave religion. Some people immediately do wonderful. They see it as empowering, a sense of freedom and adventure. Awesome. I'm so happy, truly. But there's people down here that take their own life out of sheer despair. And everyone in this middle that is affected by a multitude of variables that will determine how well they respond to this change, whether it is their environment, their culture, their upbringing, their age, their income, their background, their community, etc. Like, it is an amazing set of things that will go into this. So if you're one of the people that it worked out great for you, awesome. But we are just talking at large here. We are trying to major in the majors. That was another thing. Someone would say, oh no, I was fine with it. Great. Truly happy for you, but can you not understand that there are people where it doesn't go very well, and they're not just weak of mind? And for me, at least, the goal in having that conversation with Britt was to better understand what is actually happening in these people's minds when they go through this change. And so we try to do so with specific examples. I'll give you another one where people got really hung up. One of the examples would be prayer. A believer prays, and from the data that we understand, there is something beneficial that they're getting, even though that God doesn't exist, even though that prayer is going nowhere. It's not the only way to get it. No, of course. But it was where they were getting it. Some believers spend an immense amount of their life in prayer. And this is an excellent chance for them to talk to themselves. That was one of the points that we discussed, this inner dialogue that you get when you have a prayer life. And again, avoiding the woo and all of the things that are untrue about this. If you pray every day for the safety of your child, there is no God that is answering that and protecting your child. But by having that on the forefront of your mind, by having said that out loud each morning and each night, are you priming yourself to be more hyper aware, to consider more about where your child goes and what they are doing and who they are with, and backup procedures for them if they get lost, etc.? Yes, that is a real, tangible outcome of participating in a practice that, though false, provides a path forward for some benefit. So if you lose religion, and thus you never pray again, I don't pray to God, what are the tools like prayer that we should be holding on to or learning about or starting in lieu of the loss of prayer? Because that was a tool. And I'm hoping that I'm being way more specific and clarifying here. Because again, lots of comments about, oh, Brandon, you're endorsing prayer now? No, here, still, I will stand by this video on the problems with prayer. But what I left out of that video was that even for all those problems, it still did something that most people need to continue to do. And it's not praying, it's maybe journaling or meditating. It is a way to have the inner dialogue, the conversation with yourself, to gain this awareness or perspective that otherwise going through your daily routine, you might not otherwise get. One of the things that Britt and I talked about a lot was, okay, now we have to be more intentional because religion gave you those tools. Hey, you should have quiet time. You should study your Bible. You should pray. You should gather. You should encourage. You should have accountability. All of these things that, yes, in the way that religion does it might be false and or harmful, but at surface level are good for us nonetheless. And maybe we could frame all of this as the nuance of critique. Because again, I think that's where it really just got confusing for people is you're used to hearing me say faith bad, prayer bad, God not true. And then in this conversation, you heard prayer has benefit, religion had tools. And you're saying, wait a second, how are you justifying this? Again, the nuance of the critique is so important to be aware of. It was a 2-hour conversation for a reason. Tools versus truth claims, a distinct difference. Let me give you another example. When we got to the point of isolation, this is something that can come alongside for many people who leave a religion. And there's that physical isolation that I've talked about many times, and I talked about in that video where we lose community because our communities are religiously based, and some of us feel like we can't participate in, or we are told we cannot participate in those kinds of communities anymore. And then Britt brings up a secondary point that is internal loneliness that, yeah, we've always had. But if you were a believer, you didn't think you had. Similar to that objective morality. You thought you had a God that cared about each moment of your life. You thought you had a God that recognized when you did things that were good. And I actually cut a portion from the video for time purposes where I pushed back a little bit and I said, yeah, but there's also bad things that come with that. A lack of privacy, a feeling of scrutiny, of constant shame. There's no doubt. But one of the reasons I felt good cutting it is because it wasn't the purpose. We weren't advocating for the fact that it was true or that there was no harm from the idea that a God watches everything you do. We were talking about how there is still a tool there, something that does work well for people's well-being, where they don't feel alone, where they feel witnessed and observed, and that we know psychologically humans have this inbuilt need. So in no way were Britt and I saying people should hold on to their belief in God so that they can continue to have this witness in their life. We're saying in lack of the belief in God, knowing we will lose this witness, what else can we be doing or thinking about to ensure that this loneliness isn't totally destructive to the non-believer? I'm hoping that you're hearing the heart of what I think both of us were indeed trying to communicate and what we are concerned about, that religion, like it or not, true or not, harmful or not, also had tools. And those tools are now needing to be replaced. And I agree they should be replaced by secular things, by things that are grounded in reality, by things that are tangible and useful without the byproduct of inherent harm. 1,000,000%. But we need to have that conversation. What are those things? How do we know those things are good? Can we measure the potential harm that could come from replacing them by this? And on and on and on. It's an ongoing conversation. I am ever learning. I want to continue to talk to people that are experts in certain fields. This was kind of a really wide open, abstract, here's all the things we should be thinking about. That doesn't mean I have all the answers for it. I do know certain things that aren't the answer though. But again, it doesn't mean we don't need to find the replacement because we are people. And that's another huge point. We're all humans, and even though we're all psychologically different and we all come from different cultures and backgrounds, and we do have at a higher level different needs, at a base level, we all have a lot of very similar needs. This is the unification of humanity. I think it's actually quite beautiful. There is a reality to being human, and there are ways that most of our brains work most of the time. That is what religion had evolved with and was providing answers for, again, no matter how untrue and harmful they may have been. We need to find replacements. Because I used to have a naive take, not even during the course of this channel. This is something I had to grow out of in my early stages of deconstructing that, okay, if this thing isn't true and once I leave it, that will be enough. I'm sorry, I don't believe that will be enough. If it happens to be enough for some individuals, great, but that doesn't mean it will be enough. And this is where we got into the conversation of privilege. Ooh, yikes, scary term. I agree, guys. I hate the term privilege. I think it's been completely misused. I think it's attached to things totally incorrect, but it's the term that Britt chose to use. And when I got understanding from how she was using it, I had no problem hopping on board. If you want to call it advantage, if you want to call it luck, you can do whatever you want with it. I hope that I'm fostering a kind of community that doesn't get so hung up or so triggered by an individual word that we lose the forest for the trees. I'm going to use myself as the example. And again, let's replace that word privilege for whatever you want. I'm aware of all of this stuff. I don't believe in free will. So for me, we'll just call it luck or happenstance that I happen to have been interested in it, that I read books that led me to this understanding, that I get to have conversations with people like Britt who continue to widen that perspective for me, that I was born with a fully functioning mind that was able to learn and grow, where I can work at a job and make money and provide for my family and have free time. Even the fact that we live in this time frame where free time is something. For many people in many parts of the world, for most of human history, you didn't have downtime. You didn't get to have hobbies or interest. You had to survive. So pick whatever part you want for whatever reason, but the reality of my situation is, as someone who has left religion, though it has been incredibly hard, I am still what I consider to be thriving. I'm happy. I feel like I have meaning. I have purpose. I have a wonderful family. I have wonderful friends. I am not below the poverty line. I am able to provide in so far the way that I would like to. I get time at the end of each day. And, this is an example straight from our conversation where I connect with my kids and we do our own things now in lieu of reading the Bible together or praying together that create what I'm hoping I'm doing to help replace the tools that I don't believe in from religion for them. And so when Britt calls out, you get to do that from a position of privilege. Yes, we can all get mad at that concept, but take the person just like me, my same age, my same race, my same background, married with 2 kids, make it as even as you want. But for whatever reason, they make a fourth of my income. They work an extra job. Their spouse dies of a disease. They simply don't have the resources, the free time, the awareness to know about these things that they've lost. They've deconstructed, they've deconverted, they lost their concept of God just like I did. They've got kids they're raising just like I do, but they don't get to create those moments of tradition. They don't get to foster those moments of community. They don't even know that they're not able to do that because they're so busy working their second and third job to provide the base necessities for their kids. There is a reality difference between me and that other person, and not just for those things that I mentioned, but for the outcomes of these families and these individuals, the kids, the spouse, the individual themselves moving forward, at what level of well-being they will have after leaving religion. Now, would religion fix all that for that person? No. But for many people, the religion had made some tools to make things easier. That person can still go on Sunday and their kids can have childcare, can be around other kids, can have built-in friends, essentially, can have adults that are sharing what they believe are moral lessons with these kids. Again, we can talk all day about why it's still wrong and why it's still harmful and where it can go wrong. But there are tools that religion has built in, essentially, that person over there needs to replace now that they don't have religion, but either they don't know or they don't have the time, money, resources, etc. to do so. And understanding that, instead of saying, well, I'm so lucky, look at me, everything seems to be working out for me and my family after I left religion, is ignorant to not consider that person's perspective or, again, community at large. And so as we move forward in conversations about what it means to leave religion, it is disingenuous not to consider other people's perspectives and realities that are different from our own. If you think that that's a bad thing and we have a negative connotated word of privilege that is inherently describing that difference, and so you want to not address it, I think you're missing the bigger picture. So enough with all of that. I know I get passionate because, again, I care. I really care for this group of people that go through the world's biggest change you can do, a 180 worldview shift of everything you thought you knew was true, no longer being true. What a tricky thing that is. And I think we can do better. I know we have to do better. Britt and I disagreed on the potential for the future, on how dire this situation was, on if we'd ever at a societal level be able to overcome this or replace religion well. But neither one of us thinks that means you should pretend to believe in God, which is another huge thing that seemed to be misunderstood in the comments. So for the record, I don't believe this God is real. I believe religion is harmful. I don't believe it's only harmful though. And so when we leave it, yes, let's leave the harm. Yes, let's leave believe the falsehood, but let's replace the things that it did for us with better, healthier, more true and real things. I don't have all the answers. I'm trying to find out what all of that is. I want to share it with as many people as I can as I learn more about it. And I hope that many of you will continue to take this ride with me. One of the last things that Britt said in our conversation was that she appreciated the vulnerability we had in that conversation because, and I think all of you have probably seen this with Christians, but I'm seeing just how much atheists do this too, where we don't want to talk about the problems. So again, with Christians, they don't want to talk about how religion has a sexual abuse problem or how it has a denomination problem. They want to portray a sense of unity and correctness and higher morality, because otherwise it might look like what they believe isn't true or isn't good. And I agree with Britt that atheists can do this as well, where we don't want to talk about how things are hard or where it can go wrong or the good things religion did for us that we need to find replacements for, because we don't want to give the Christians a foothold to say, ha, see? And I get that. I can totally feel that way. But I would much rather have a real, if we're talking about truth and reality here, a real conversation about the parts of, again, you can't even group all atheists together, but where the lack or loss of belief can go wrong or can be hard, then I would pretend that everything just gets better when you leave religion and that no God and no myth and no tools from those gods or those myths are not having an impact. However false or harmful they may also be. I'm adding that caveat all the time because I want to be crystal clear. So that's it for today. I have my next 3 videos mapped out, my Thursday, Sunday, Tuesday. I'm really excited about them. Please stick around for them. I'd love to hear any comments down below. I'm not looking for anyone that disagreed with me to now say, yep, you were right. I apologize. I agree. No. You don't owe me anything. You didn't hurt me by disagreeing with me. You may still very well disagree with me and you might be right. I just want the conversations to be happening. Truly. Just want a space where we can all say, this is hard. This is confusing. Can we do better? What would that look like? And one thing that did resonate in the comments, and I'll end with this, is that many people said, I'm not sure if I agree, but you've given me a lot to think about. Great. Because as we always say at the end of each video, what I really want, keep thinking. I'd like to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast and Boris GVI, Jason, Joe, Kitboga, Perry, Rokkit, Shawn, and StrongRex, my Humanist heroes, Imposter, James, Jarrod, Kristi, and Thronus, my Atheist advocates, Caleb, David, Jeff, Jeffrey, Mrs. Webb, Paul, Sparky, and Todd, as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. If you believe in the mission of this channel or you just enjoy its content, please consider joining these fine people.